Colleagues, could I ask for screens on, please? Barb, how do we get a... So colleagues, thank you. We'll start in just a few moments. Just to let you know, we, and for the benefit of the public as well, eScribe is working, our city website is working, and YouTube Corporate Communications is currently working on that, but I don't think it's appropriate that we delay this meeting further. So with your indulgence, we're going to start in just a moment. I'll ask the clerk to confirm quorum, please.
Through the chair, yes, I can confirm quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. So colleagues and to the public, welcome to the 12th meeting of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee. This is a virtual meeting held during the COVID-19 emergency. And we'd ask the public to check the website for current details of COVID-19 service impacts. Meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact sppc@london.ca. I will look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. I see none. I will remind colleagues, as is our way, that we have one of our colleagues who is on leave at this point, Councillor Kabaga, and that's the only absence of which I've been made aware. We have no items on the consent agenda, no scheduled items. We do have, though, 5 items that we will deal with separately. And the first is request for delegation status for pillars of medical ethics. And we have a number of addeds. You will see that we have a significant number of addeds, more than at least up to 29 at this count, and there may be some additional ones where they have requested delegation status. I'll call on Councillor Lewis. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. With regard to item 4.1, I want to put a motion on the floor. I will see if there's a seconder for that, and then I'll speak to it briefly. But I would like to move that communications listed on the public agenda as items 4.1A, 4.1, and then A through AC inclusive be received for information, and no further action be taken with respect to these submissions. It being noted that there are no current related decisions or considerations before the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee at this time.
Would you have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Turner? Thank you. Comments or questions? Councillor Lewis, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to be really brief but very clear on this. All of the requests for delegation status reasons outlined in the communications we've received are not, in fact, within municipal jurisdiction. Whether they are under the jurisdiction of the province of Ontario or whether they are under the jurisdiction of the Chief Medical Officer of Health with our health unit, they are not decisions for council to be making. I think with respect to both the members of the public, to our staff, and to colleagues, it quite frankly does not represent a good use of everyone's time to me to listen to something presentation-wise that we are not going to ultimately be able to do anything about at the end of the meeting because it's not within our jurisdiction to do so. I think that actually feeds into the cynicism we often hear from people that, well, council doesn't listen, council didn't do anything about it. Respectfully, this is a situation where we can't. And so I think with respect to everybody's time, we should receive the communications and then move on to the next item on the agenda.
Thank you. Next on the list, I have Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Worship. I don't agree with Councillor Lewis. There does seem to be a decision before this council at our Corporate Services Committee. There was the move to create a proof of vaccination policy for council. And for that reason, we actually are making a decision and therefore setting an example for the rest of the community.
Point of order.
Point of order, Councillor Lewis, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the councillor's objection, the vaccination policy for City Hall staff is an item on the Corporate Services agenda, which comes to council next. It is not on the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee agenda.
I will uphold that point of order. Go ahead, Councillor Van Holst.
Okay, thank you. That's the councillor is correct about the staff policy. So I guess my question through you to our staff then is the policy that's going to be created for council specifically, where will that policy go for a final decision? Or will it be the Corporate Services Committee, or will it be this committee?
Let's ask, thank you for that. Let's ask the clerk.
Thank you through the chair. Before providing that additional clarification, I would like to remind the committee that that's only a recommendation from the Corporate Services Committee and it has not been approved by council yet. I can't say with confidence that there's been a determination of which committee that would go to.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst.
Okay. I think that generally the COVID-related matters were coming here, and this would certainly be a decision that would be made since it applies to all the councillors, would likely be made by all the councillors. And so I think this is actually the appropriate place to have this discussion. And so for that reason, if the motion is defeated, and I hope it is, then I'll move that we receive the delegations, and because we certainly have the time this evening, and there are people who would like to comment. So that will be my course of action, Your Worship.
Thanks very much. Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks to Councillor Lewis for putting this motion forward. It is almost word for word what I was going to say. So I think it's important to recognize that we entertain delegations very frequently, and we provide a fair amount of latitude to that delegation request. In fact, often we receive those requests on the same day and allow them to speak at that point. I think it's very important for our process that we have opportunities for delegations, but those delegations need to be related to items within the council's purview. This is absolutely not within our purview. We've had 2 items on COVID policy that this council has put into place, or will put in place perhaps. The first was a masking policy for businesses. That was a bylaw, and that bylaw has since been rescinded. The other is an internal policy for corporate staff and for potentially for council as well. Those are not within the public debate, and those are not within the municipal purview. Beyond those, there's nothing within the municipal purview. As Councillor Lewis correctly identified, policy for our region is set by the province and by the medical officer of health. So it's not pertinent to our discussion here. This is not to interfere with debate in any way, but it's the wrong place for that debate. And I'd respectfully suggest to the people who have made the delegation request to make that application to the province and not to us.
Thanks very much. Any other speakers to the issue? I have Councillor Squire.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair. I think it's important to say, obviously, that we do have a lot of delegations. We hear from the public a lot, and I've very seldom seen a delegation turned down at council where it is pertinent and relates to a matter that is before us. And I think since this started, we've stayed out of what I think is a dangerous thing to do, is that for politicians to start getting into debates about health issues. We are not health experts, and we should be deferring to the health unit and the provincial officers of health to give us advice and pass the regulations that they're passing and the orders that they're passing. As soon as we cross that line, which I think we're getting very close to doing if we allow these delegations tonight, we're getting into a general debate on whether people should be vaccinated or not, whether people should wear masks or not. And quite frankly, I refuse to get into that debate because it's not something that I will express an opinion on as a municipal politician, nor do I think any of us should. Some of us may delight in opportunities to discuss things that we may be interested in, but that doesn't make them within the jurisdiction of a municipal council. So I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? In that case, there's a duly moved and seconded motion. We will call the question. I'm sorry, Councillor Van Holst, I just saw you at the end there. I apologize. Go ahead.
Okay, yes, thank you, Your Worship. And so this is a question through you to our staff. It's been suggested that we are not decision makers with a purview in this matter, and that we act on the advice of the medical officer of health. I do believe that when the medical officer of health provides us advice, we are actually acting, and that the health unit can, if they want, implement their own rules, but that's not what's happening here. This is not a policy. What's happening here, either for the staff or for the councillors, is not a policy that's being brought down from the province. This is one that we are in fact initiating. And my question, I guess, if we are provided with advice, or if we ask for advice, are we obliged to come up with a policy based on that?
I'm not sure that if I might direct this to Mr. Card or Ms. Livingston. Mr. Card, do you want to comment on that?
I will, Your Worship. Thank you. The province has recently issued a regulation that does require businesses, organizations, actually, I think is the term, to whom medical public health advice provided by the Chief Medical Officer of Health to respond as directed by the Chief Medical Officer of Health. So in that case, there is certainly an obligation. When it comes to policies, we have throughout the pandemic been following the advice of our local medical officer of health, and we continue to do that. We do that because, as Councillor Squire said, we're not experts in these matters. And we have tried to align our policies with the advice that we've been receiving both at the provincial level and from the local medical officer of health. Now, in a few cases, the province, through the Chief Medical Officer of Health, has issued directives. They apply, for example, to our long-term care facility and to hospitals and continuing care. But generally speaking, employers and other organizations in the province are responsible for acting on appropriate advice. And this is particularly important when it comes to occupational health and safety matters. And our own internal policy is a policy that is an administrative policy for our staff and for contracting parties with the City of London. What the council would be considering at the request of Corporate Services Committee would be a policy applicable to councillors, which would be something that the council would presumably do in the interest of maintaining the occupational health and safety initiative that the administration is applying to the administration. So, do we have to do these things? Technically, no, but indirectly, yes, because we have responsibilities under a number of acts to ensure that our workers are adequately protected and that we deliver public services in a safe manner.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst, any further comments?
Thank you. I appreciate the answer.
Thank you. Any other comments? Colleague, Councillor Helmer, please.
Thank you. I guess I have a more expansive understanding of what is and isn't within our jurisdiction in terms of passing bylaws. And if we were dealing with a bylaw, I think it would be fine to hear from delegates about their views on the bylaw. We have done that in the past, even on very closely related matters to the one that's being suggested today. What I don't agree with is that we need to turn over a big chunk of the meeting to have people talk about whatever issue they want to bring up in the moment. I just don't think that that's necessary. And, we don't have a decision to make. We're not working on a bylaw where we need to get input from the public. And I just don't think it's appropriate to do it at this particular meeting. So I'm going to support the motion that Councillor Lewis has put on the table. I think it's an appropriate way to handle. We can't just have people saying, well, I'd like to talk about this issue and then have a whole hour and a half long discussion where we just hear from people about what they think on an issue when we're not actually making a decision. There's no bylaw in front of us. We're not getting into a public participation meeting. There's no plan for delegation status. I just don't think it's a good process to follow. So I'll support what Councillor Lewis has suggested.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed.
Thanks very much. To is our communications related to the Improvement Association. And you'll note that the chair of the LDBA has communicated to the clerk that they're in receipt of Councillor Kayabaga's request for political campaign leave and have authorized her request and specifically what they are looking for. If you'll look at what they have, that their boards have approved, have been both from LDBA and Main Street London, that given the current disposition of the strategic planning cycles for London LDBA and Main Street London, the letter be sent, drafted and sent by the leadership to the clerk, requesting the council be petitioned to extraordinarily nominate and confirm a temporary replacement elected representative until the timing of Councillor Kayabaga's leave is resolved. And they have further requested the correspondence appointment be brought forward at the next appropriate standing committee, which happens to be this particular meeting. And then there's a separate communication from Councillor Kayabaga, but more importantly, I'd like to know the will of council for this purpose here. Councillor Lehman, do you have a thought?
Thank you, Your Worship. I should have mentioned this at the start of the meeting. I will disclose a pecuniary interest on 4.2 as I am a member of the LDBA.
So noted. Thanks very much. So where do we want to go with this? Councillor Lewis, you have a thought?
Thank you, Your Worship. I know we're entering into a little bit of discussion without a formal motion on the floor, but I just want to share my thoughts with colleagues and see what they...
Actually, I'd like to get a motion on the floor and then we can have that discussion, please. So if someone's prepared to move it, I'm not sure if you are, but I did see Councillor Helmer's hand up. What's your pleasure, Councillor Lewis? I recognized you first.
Well, I will yield to Councillor Helmer. I will share that my thought would be a motion to refer this to a meeting after the 20th of September rather than fill a spot twice.
Councillor Helmer, you had your hand.
Sure. I had a discussion with Councillor Kaibaga and she asked me if I'd be willing to fill in for her. And I said, sure. So it seems like something we should take care of soon. They seem to be without a representative and dealing with a rather important issue. I don't know what's going to happen with the election. It could be a very long leave of absence that turns out to be permanent, or it could be very short and she could be coming back very soon. Okay. Either way, it seems like making the change now would make sense. Okay, I'm mindful we're having discussion before motions on the floor, and I'm going to stop that. If I could, please, I'd like to have a motion on the floor. I'll recognize Councillor, I think I see Councillor, I apologize, Hopkins, and then Councillor Turner. Councillor Hopkins, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to put the motion to have Councillor Helmer be appointed to the board. I appreciate his comments. I understand that there are decisions that need to be made sooner than later, so happy to move the motion.
Councillor Hopkins, I'm going to not challenge that. I just need some clarity around this, because if you look at the wording from LDBA and Main Street London, they were talking about things like temporary replacement. They were talking about until the councillor's leave is resolved. I don't know how specific you would choose to be, but I think we need some clarity around that. From your perspective, you're moving a motion. What would you like to see in that, please?
The motion that Councillor Helmer be appointed to as municipal council representative to the Downtown Business BIA to replace Councillor Calabaga. I agree that we need a representative right away, regardless what the outcome will be. Representation is needed, and I don't understand why we can't make that decision today.
Okay, I've got, I'm still looking for a seconder for that. Councillor Turner, is that you seconding?
Yeah, perhaps I could add some clarity to that, the appointment be on an interim basis until such time as Councillor Cabaga's status is resolved.
So that reads a lot like what we've received from Main Street London and LDBA, then, is what I'm hearing from you. Okay, then we have a mover and a seconder to that. We have a speakers list. Let's start with Councillor Squire, please.
This is, I think, an important point. The decision as to who sits on boards is a council decision. And we've been through this before, unfortunately, where the councillor who's leaving a position names the person they would prefer to be their replacement. And there's nothing against Councillor Helmer, and he should be nominated and have a chance to run for this, but we can't go back and start saying, well, you're leaving a board, so you make the recommendation as to who's going to replace you, and we'll agree with that. So I think there should be a chance to nominate other interested people for the position. If there may be others here. I'm certainly aware that there are other people who may be interested in this position. I'd be content to nominate them and have a vote. I think it should be a open, fair process. And before we go right to saying, well, we're gonna appoint the person that the councillor prefers, let's have a democratic and proper process here.
I might, as a point of clarification, did speak with the clerk, because there was communication from Councillor Calabaga dated August 17. And at that point, the councillor was on leave, I believe. So I think the question is, though, with a motion on the floor, which is very specific, versus the more open process, Councillor Squire, that you are talking in terms of, I think for us to have that broader open nomination process for all council members, we do have a motion on the floor. But I'm just going to come back to the clerk. Just bear with me for a moment, colleagues, in terms of the procedure that we would typically use to select committee members. So just bear with me a second, please, and you can talk amongst yourselves for a moment. Thanks very much. In conferring with the clerk, a couple of things were clear. As colleagues know, SPPC is the committee that makes the recommendations ultimately for council. So this motion is within propriety and is correct. If we do not, if we wish to have a more open process, then we would defeat the motion and then work from there. But this is a legitimate process by which we would consider selecting as per the wording, a temporary replacement. Councillor Helmer, go ahead, please.
If it simplifies things, I'm happy to have the vote on who wants to be the replacement. I think it's a bit silly. We just need someone to fill in for a while, but if someone really wants to battle it out for the replacement on the LDBA, let's go ahead and do that. We don't need to have a vote just on me. we can have a vote on who people prefer, and we'll see who gets the most votes, I guess. That's fine.
Well, if that's the case, then we would ask Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Turner, just to them to withdraw that, in which case that we can go to that broader, more open approach. Councillor Hopkins?
Sure.
That was easy. Councillor Turner, are you sure?
I can agree to that. I think it probably makes sense to change the motion to that council appoint an interim replacement for Councillor Kayabaga, and that the council be polled to see if there are any nominees.
All right, so clerk's advised me there's nothing to vote on here. So what I think the motion ultimately would do would be to approve whoever that temporary replacement ultimately is. So with that in mind, what I would like to do is open this up for any member of council who is interested in providing replacement status on a temporary basis for the position on LDBA in Main Street. So with that, I'll look for nominations. Councillor Turner.
I'll nominate Councillor Helmer.
Okay. Councillor Lewis, yes?
Sorry, Your Worship, I had my hand up and I recognize you were looking at the screen and went to Councillor Turner first. But I think this is going to take precedence. And that is that I would like to move a referral of this item to the next cycle of SPPC. I will look to see if I have a seconder, and then I will speak very briefly to the reasoning for that.
Okay, I would accept that that's a duly constituted motion, seconded by Councillor Squire. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and briefly, colleagues, I agree with Councillor Squire in that it's actually not helpful to me. And I think it's actually difficult for other members of council to consider if they'd want to put their name forward. When a letter is coming in, essentially handpicking a replacement for something. I also respectfully, because I do understand, strategic plans are important, and I understand the Downtown London Association is developing that. At the same time, I'll reiterate what I said earlier. The federal election is 2 weeks away. Very shortly after that, we will know whether there is a permanent vacancy on this board or whether Councillor Kayabaga will be returning to that board. And so I am not genuinely, and this is not any slight against Councillor Helmer, because I know he would do a great job there. And I do appreciate the language that Councillor Turner outlined in terms of making it very clear the interim nature of it. I'm just not interested in filling a position twice in the course of 2 to 3 weeks. I think that any member of council could attend as a non-voting member of the Downtown London Association and offer their feedback on their strategic plan. I don't think that the lack of a voting councillor on the board right now presents an issue for quorum or anything of that nature. So I just do not see the urgency in this, and I see, in fairness to other members of council, one cycle to let folks decide whether or not they would want to put their name forward as being fair.
Thank you. I have Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Your Worship. What we generally try to do when we're dealing with board appointments, we certainly do this often with London Hydro. We listen to their advice. They come forward and they say, this is the type of person that we would like on our board. We need these kinds of skills, and we're proposing this particular person. A city council generally tries to accommodate a board. So what this board has done is they've asked us to extraordinarily nominate. We have to recognize that the next time that this committee meets is September 28th. And then after that, it has to go to council before the nomination takes place. We've had this agenda since last Tuesday online. We were sent a version of this agenda last Tuesday. That's almost a full week that everybody had time to ponder this. I'm sure if there's anybody on this committee that is interested in serving for a very short, possibly a very short period of time on this board, that they know, they already know, anybody that's interested in this. I'm not saying that we automatically do whatever a counselor is suggesting, but given that everybody is busy on this council, given that we all have standing committees of council that we sit on and outside boards and commissions and neighborhood groups and our own constituency that we are all looking after and interacting with, the counselor who's on leave took it upon herself to check and see if somebody would be interested in serving on this board. So that is really how I see the letter. Someone's interested, consider this person. I'm willing to look at multiple nominations and make the decision tonight. But we're going to leave a board without a voting member. They have asked us to appoint someone. They have asked us to do it as an extraordinary interim measure. And I think we should listen to them and do what they've asked. We've had a week to think about it ourselves. And I hope that this committee defeats the referral.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? I have, I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to tell with just hands held, but I'll start with Councillor Hopkins, please. Then I'll go to Councillor Helmer and Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just really surprised that we're having this conversation, but I think it really shows the importance of trying to support boards and their requests. And if I don't understand why we would not do that. I am supportive of Councillor Helmer being appointed. He's opened it up to whoever wants to put their names forward to have that vote. I'm okay with that. I'm supportive of Councillor Helmer just because he's a downtown ward councillor. Why wouldn't I support that? It just is really confusing to me why we would even refer this back when the board itself is asking that we make a decision, and I will not be supporting the referral back.
Thank you. I have Councillor Helmer, please.
Yeah, just on the idea of referring it, it's my understanding from both the communication from the chairs of these two organizations and from my conversation with Councillor Kaibaga, that the board's dealing with an important matter, which is why they want to have a municipal representative on there right now. So that's why they've written to us. That's why she asked me, can you fill in for me while I'm on leave? So referring it seems to be totally frustrating, both what the chairs are asking for and what Councillor Kaibaga, as the current municipal representative who's on leave, is asking for. They're the ones who know this organization the best. I'm taking my cue from them about what they actually need from us. I'm happy to do it. And if somebody else is interested, perhaps we should move on to the voting about who the temporary replacement is going to be. Referring it just seems like a very bad idea.
Okay, I now have Councillor Turner. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll be brief. I'll concur with Councillor Helmer. The rationale is exactly as Councillor Helmer pointed out there. Further, it wouldn't be the same as just having a counselor attend these meetings. They wouldn't have the rights and privileges associated with an appointed member, and including in-camera discussions, which might be pertinent to the discussions that are immediate and at hand. So the importance of having a municipal government liaison directly within the LDBA is large, and I think the matter of time is important. Once the election is resolved, we can return to this and restore or continue as appropriate. But for right now, I think it's important that somebody's in place, whomever it is.
I'm going to ask the Deputy Mayor to take the chair, please.
I have the chair, and I'll go to the mayor.
Thanks very much. Colleagues, I am not going to support the motion, and I'll move, and if it is defeated, then I think the recommendation is that we appoint a council member on some interim basis. I've heard it referenced. I just want to touch on something here. It probably would have been cleaner, frankly, if the communications from Main Street and LDBA came through the clerk, which it did, without a subsequent letter from the councillor, who, while certainly is the closest to the downtown BIA and knows it best. The problem was, took leave on August 13th, the letter's dated August 17th, and so I don't think the letter was appropriate, not the content frankly, but the fact that it was sent at all. But having said it, I've indicated my position on this, and that we can make an appropriate decision potentially tonight if the motion is defeated. That's all I'm going to add to that. Back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I'll return the chair to the mayor.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll ask the clerk just to read the motion, just because we've talked about two different things here. If you would, please, clerk.
Thank you. Through the chair, the motion is moved by Councillor Lewis and seconded by Councillor Squire that consideration of an interim councillor appointment to the London Downtown Business Association Board of Directors be referred to a future meeting of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee in order to allow for members of council to express their interest in the appointment.
With that, we will call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion is lost, 4-9.
Thank you. Councillor Turner, please, for, I think in fairness to the motion that you were directing.
Thank you. I'll move that we receive communications from the LDBA and from Councillor Kayabaga and seek nominations amongst our colleagues to fill the position on an interim basis until such time as the election has been decided.
And do you have a seconder for that? I see Councillor Hopkins. Thanks very much. Any comments or questions about that before we get into the content of determining an interest from colleagues? Any comments or questions? I see none. We'll call the question. I'll ask the clerk to read the motion, please.
The motion is moved by Councillor Turner and seconded by Councillor Hopkins that the communications from London Downtown Business Improvement Association and Councillor Kayabaga be received and council members be given an opportunity to be selected for the interim appointment.
With that, we will now call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed, 13.
So colleagues, now look for from the floor of council members and or individual indications of interest if you so choose. Councillor Turner.
I'll try again. I'll nominate to Councillor Helmer. Sorry.
Thanks very much. Councillor Squire.
Councillor Hillier has indicated to me an interest in this position, and given that, I'm prepared to nominate him.
Thanks very much. Other nominations? I'll look for a motion that nominations be closed. Councillor Pelosi, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. We're about to open up the selection process the clerk has so ably put together. So with that, for that motion to close nominations, I'll just do a hand vote. All those in favor, screens on, please. Clerk, I think it looks unanimous.
I don't have a vote from Councillor Sully.
Councillor Salih? Councillor Salih? We'll declare him as absent for the vote, and I know there is any abstentions? Okay, go ahead.
Your
Clerk.
worship, I see Councillor Salih's hand has been raised.
Hold on. Yes, I do see it as well. Thank you, Councillor Salih. I appreciate that.
So I will open the vote for the selection process. My apologies through the chair, the previous vote passed.
So colleagues, what that means is that we will now put those names forward on your screens for voting.
Sorry, through the chair, I would just like to confirm this is an interim appointment to the London Downtown Business Association Board of Directors. I'm getting nods. Yes, okay, thank you.
I know it is, colleagues, as a point of clarification, I know it's temporary, but here we have the interesting scenario of the incumbent councillor who is currently on leave. And if that person, that leave gets extended, this temporary could be something more significant than depending on. Councillor Lewis, do you want to add some comment to this?
I think Councillor Turner's language, Your Worship, about until the councillor's leave is resolved was completely appropriate, and if we had that included, I'd be comfortable with that.
Okay, so noted. Thanks very much. Councillor Van Holst?
Yes, your worship, I'm just wondering if either Councillor Hillier or Councillor Helmer wants to speak to their.
Yeah, we're past that, I think, because we've opened up the vote, but otherwise.
Oh, I see it. Okay, I see it's come up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, and Councillor Helmer has.
Thank you very much. I look for a motion to accept Councillor Helmer as the interim representative on the LDBA Main Street London Board. Councillor Lewis? Is there a seconder? Councillor Van Holst, thank you. Comments, questions? Then we'll call the question.
Sorry, Your Worship, I did have my hand up for a comment.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please, Councillor Plaza.
Just thank you to council colleagues. For me, it's the same as the issue I raised when we filled the vacancy for the London Police Services Board, that every colleague have an equal opportunity to have a chance to be of service to Londoners. So thank you for this process and for the councillors who are willing to serve.
I think that's thoughtfully said. Thank you. Any other comments before we ask the clerk to put the vote up to confirm Councillor Lewis, or Councillor Helmer, excuse me. Go ahead, clerk.
Councillor Helmer? Closing the vote, the motion is passed 13-0 with 1 recused.
Councillor Hillier. Congratulations, Councillor Helmer, on the added responsibilities there. Thank you very much. Colleagues, I'll turn your attention to 4.3, which is the 5th report of the Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Oppression Advisory Committee in your package. This meeting, which took place on August the 19th, there are a number of items there. And beyond the items for discussion, the additional business that M. Bazali be elected as chair for the remainder of the current term. I'll look for a motion to receive this report and then invite any discussion or commentary as you wish. Is there a motion to receive? I see Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Comments or discussion? Seeing none, then we will call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
Now, there's a vacancy on the London Transit Commission as a result of the resignation of Tanya Park, as she is no longer a resident of London and therefore doesn't meet the qualifications to serve on the commission. To bring to your attention, the commission passed a motion to recommend to council the vacancy be filled for the remainder of the term, which is November 2022. We appreciate Ms. Park, by the way, has indicated her willingness to continue to serve on the commission until the vacancy can be filled, as is the will of council. So that's from Ms. Pelechny, the CEO, General Manager of the London Transit Commission. So I'm at your pleasure. We typically have had a process by which we have filled these vacancies. I'll remind you, this is a public vacancy, and as such, there is a process, a public process that we use. I wonder if I could just call on the clerk for a moment, just before we, just to help clarify the process by which we use, to ask her to, just to advise council of that public process that is typical. Clerk?
Thank you. Through the chair, we have re-advertised the positions, and we're directed by council. We have been in contact with any persons with applications on file to see if they want their applications to stand.
So we need to, based on the spirit of that, if it's the will of council, we need to direct the clerk to put a process in motion to be able to fill that vacancy. So I'll be looking for some wording. Very appropriate. Councillor Squire, if you might like to start us off.
Yeah, I just wanted to indicate, just to update that Ms. Park has indicated that she's actually going to be leaving London on September 29th. That's the date of our next meeting. So she'll actually be moving to St. Thomas on that particular date. And just to remind everyone that it's a requirement of this position that you do be a resident of London. So we will not have a commissioner on starting at the September 29th meeting. So I suppose the sooner the better. And I'd be prepared to make a motion that this be referred. I suppose it has to be done by SPPC, the next SPPC meeting, with appropriate candidates brought forward by the clerk's office. Is that appropriate motion?
Is that sufficient wording for you, clerk, to work with? She will do her best, which means yes. So in the spirit of that, I will look for a seconder for that.
I never read her the same way. She may be saying yes, but she's probably going to kill me when the meeting's over, but that's the way it goes.
So we're directing the clerk to put a process together for this public appointment for the London Transit Commission, but I will require a seconder before we open it up for any discussion. I see Councillor Van Meerbruggen, thank you. Comments or questions? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, this is just a comment for the clerk. I find when a lot of time has passed, sometimes people have done really impressive things between the time of their original application and today. So maybe when you reach out to ask if those before want their application to stand, you could strongly encourage them to perhaps update their application with what they've, done since. And that way, I think that'll give them the most competitive chance in the process.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? All right, is there sufficient clarity then, clerk, as we move to vote on this? Thanks very much. Let's take a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
Thanks very much. Looks like we're leaning for amount of things to be done going forward. Colleagues, I'll turn your attention to 4.5, the appointment to the London Hydro Inc. Board of Directors. You'll note that the Corporate Services Committee recommended that the application of Tanya Gadeen be forwarded to us as the shareholder for appointment to the London Hydro Board of Directors. So with that, I'll look for a motion to accept the report from Corporate Services Committee. I see Councillor Van Holst. Is there a seconder? I see Councillor Lewis. Thank you. Comments or questions? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Worship. And also I'd like to extend my thanks to all the applicants. This was an interview process with excellent people engaged in hoping to participate. The voting was very even, so every candidate received a vote. One received two. So although I'm delighted to move the appointment of Ms. Tanya Gadine, I will also in the future suggest that when our new co is established, that both Ms. Parks and Mr. Stefanko be invited to sit on that board.
Thanks very much. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we will call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
I'd like to echo Councillor Van Holst's comments, colleagues, about those who serve on our boards. We've said this before as we have appointed people, but I think it takes some focus to want to do this, and that commitment to service in our community is sincerely appreciated, so we thank them. Colleagues, we have under item 5, deferred matters, some additional business actually. And what you'll see in front of you in item 5.1 is kind of a quasi letter of resignation from the deputy mayor it is a letter of resignation, he tells me, from the Hyde Park BIA. And by virtue of the fact that we have two councillors in Ward 7 and 8 who have responsibilities that cover the Hyde Park BIA, he has made a separate recommendation to support Councillor Lehman. In a sense, it was kind of like the most recent item that we dealt with, where we were wondering whether that should be open to all or not. This might be a little bit different, but having said it, I think the first thing we have to do is I think we have to accept the resignation of the deputy mayor as a representative of the BIA. If that goes through, then we open up for nominations, though, notwithstanding, if we want to be consistent with what we've done in the past. So if we're all good with that, I think it may sound obvious or whatever, but I think we have a process we have to respect. So with that, I'll look for a motion to use this letter we won't say that, but to accept the the resignation of Councillor Morgan from the Hyde Park BIA. Is there a mover to that? Councillor Lewis, is there a seconder? Councillor Turner, comments or questions? I'm not sure this is where you give your retirement speech, Deputy Mayor, but I see no comments or questions, so let's call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
Now, we could stop there, but I don't think the vacancy there in the Hyde Park BIA. We look for someone to move motion to open up this position to members of council. And to that effect, I see Councillor Lewis moving that. My seconder is Councillor Pelosa. Thanks very much. So with that, we will call that question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
I'll look for nominations for the replacement of the irreplaceable councillor from Ward 7 for the Hyde Park BIA representation. Is there someone that wishes to either nominate someone or put their name forward? Councillor Helmer.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Lehman.
An inspired choice. Seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Are any other nominations, or were you looking to put your name forward? Councillor Van Holst, I'm sorry. You weren't, okay. Any other nominations? Seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Well, actually, I think what we do now is we've got one nomination. I will look to see if, rather than accept that, we put a name forward, look for nominations to be closed. Is there a mover? Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Pelosa. That question we can call, which then implies the recommendation. Just let me amend that slightly, that we, and I'll look to Councillors Turner and Pelosa, that we close nominations and through that have a selected candidate for the role. Apparently, we have someone to speak to the motion after all. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So first off, I'll apologize for not following the proper process in the submission of my letter. I'll endeavor to do that in the future. What I will say is my observation of the Hyde Park BIA, which is new, and I am the only councillor who has served on it since its creation, is that it is fairly divided between two separate wards. And I know we've endeavored to have the ward councillor serve on the BIAs when they're willing to do so, although it's obviously an open selection. I think that this is it's a fairly unique thing, and I'm glad that council has accepted my resignation, and I'm glad Councillor Lehman is nominated because, again, this is a BIA that is split pretty evenly between our wards, and I think that it'll be an excellent opportunity for Councillor Lehman to have a turn on this BIA. And I think I'll turn my mind to our process. I certainly think it should be open and competitive, but it might be advantageous to approach this particular BIA a little bit differently in the future, given the connections to two ward councillors, although I'll think about that in the future and we'll see where it goes. And obviously the new member can give his opinion as well after he's served for a little bit, so.
This may be a harder vote than I thought. Councillor Lehman, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to chime in here. I appreciate the confidence of the committee. I have served on the LDBA in a board position. I have attended meetings of the Hyde Park BIA as well as a non-voting member. And this gives me a chance to represent businesses in my ward that has been stated. And I will do my best to fill the big shoes of the deputy mayor on this board. Thank you.
Well, then I hope you secure the vote with all of that. Folks, we have a motion that nominations be closed and that we accept Councillor Lehman as the representative. Let's call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
Thanks very much, and congratulations, Councillor Lehman. Colleagues, before we adjourn, just a couple of things. You know, I've been away for a couple of weeks, and I'd like to thank the Deputy Mayor for filling in admirably through that time, and Councillor Pelosi as well on the weekend most recently. And sincerely appreciated. Thank you very much. But really, the additional thanks has to go to our staff. Since our last meeting that we have had, there's been so much going on, and there's been some dramatic things that council's had to deal with in that time. But Ms. Livingston, please, to you and all of our staff from across the spectrum of the city, our deepest appreciation to them on behalf of council. We're very grateful for the work that they consistently do, and summer hasn't deferred them in any sense to do what they need to do to keep the city running well and smooth. So again, sincere thanks from all of us. So with that, colleagues, I will look for